Okay, we're gonna play a game. I have this grid set up here that has some pink squares and some orange squares, and we get to play a game with it. And it's the best kind of game where we get to do a bunch of math. So here's the name of the game. So for each of the orange squares, when I get to that square, all I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the row and the column that that square is on. So for this square, 2 is the row, 2 is the column, so it's 2 times 2, and that's 4. And then we just do it for all 9 squares. So we're going to go through pretty quickly. So this one is 2 times 3, so that's 6. This one is 2 times 4, so that's 8. If you are not cheering out at your phone with glee right now, then you're disappointing me. This one is 3 times 2, that's 6. This one is 3 times 3, that's 9. This one is 4 times 3, and that's 12. This one is 4 times 2, and that's 8. This one is 4 times 3, and that's 12. And this one is 4 times 4, and that is 16. Great job, everyone. We have now set up the game. If you thought that we were playing the game because we were doing math, you would be incorrect because we were not doing math. Math is not computation. Math is not this number times this number is this other number. We haven't done any math yet. The math that we have to do is we have to describe this and find some pattern in it and talk about things that are happening. So what patterns do you see? Do you see anything interesting about these orange squares? Anything that's not just random numbers, any kind of pattern? Did you see that this 6 and this 6, that there's a diagonal line here where the 6s are? Did you see that there's a diagonal line where the 12s are? And kind of there's a diagonal line here with the 8s? And I wonder why that could be. Why might this and this be related to each other? And maybe if you found a pattern like that, you would put a fancy name on it, and that fancy name would maybe rhyme with like schmutative property of schmultiplication. And then you would go and teach a bunch of middle schoolers, and you would say, like, today we are going to learn all the properties of multiplication. And you'd say that this is the schmutative property of schmultiplication. And then they'd cry because you think that you're talking about something really complicated when all it is that these numbers are on the diagonal, that there's a pattern here, and maybe we should be interested in that. That honestly does not have much to do with the thesis of this video. So we are going to talk about another set of numbers here, and that's this big long diagonal here, this 4, 9, and 16. The pattern that we're looking at here is that this diagonal, the numbers that are here, it happens when the row and the column are the same number. So this 4 happens when there's a 2 and a 2. This 9 happens when there's a 3 and a 3. This 16 happens when there's a 4 and a 4. These are numbers that we'll call square numbers. If you really want the honest reason why they're called that, it's because if you make a square with 2 as a length, the area of it is 2 times 2. The area of it is 2 times 2, which makes it 4. The area of a square of length 3 would be 3 times 3, which would make it 9. That's why we call them square numbers. Not important. We just named it that. Square numbers. So these are the squares, 4, 9, and 16. 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16. If I were to say, what is 3 squared? What I'm saying is, what is 3 times itself? What is 3 times 3? And we know the answer to be 9 here. So we have this new concept being brought to us of a square root. It's not entirely new. We've heard of it before, but we're not comfortable with it because we don't use it all the time because we're not really sure what a square root does or is. Like I know what adding is. It's like when you take things and you clump them into the same pile. I know what subtracting is. It's like when you take a pile and you pull things out of it, or when you see the difference between the height of 2 objects or something. But I don't yet know really, I can't get my mind around what a square root really is. And that's because a square root's rooted, that's a pun, it's rooted in the idea that there are inverse operations. So it's like if there were some kind of line here. So this is the border between 2 kingdoms. So this is like real kingdom. This is like real kingdom down here. And then up here is like weirdo kingdom. And so if you were to have to cross the border, if something were to have to cross the border, and let's say that in order to cross it, you have to add 4, sorry. You have to add 4 to whatever it is that you're coming in with. So if like 2 lives over here, if 2 crosses the border, it has to add 4. 2 becomes 6 when it crosses this border. If it wants to come home, if now 6 wants to come home, it can't go this way and add 4 again. That's not going to get it back to where it started. It's up here in Weirdo Land, and it wants to come home, so it has to do the opposite of what it did to get into Weirdo Land. So if we were to do the opposite of getting into Weirdo Land, we'd have to subtract 4 to come back. The inverse of addition is subtracting. It's not until we subtract 4 that we can come back and land back where we started. If there's a different kind of a border that deals with multiplication, where if somebody comes into this kingdom, if Ford lives in this kingdom and wants to travel into Bizarro Weirdo Kingdom, it would have to multiply itself by 2 and it would become 8. If it wants to come back, it has to do the opposite of multiplying by 2, and the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. That's how it comes home. It has to divide itself by 2 to come home. If this feels familiar to solving equations for x, that's because it is. If you're seeing a pattern between what we're doing and solving equations for x, this is what you're doing. So if there's another kingdom, and when you walk into the kingdom, when you're in real kingdom, and you're a lonely little 3, and you want to go see your friends in Bizarro Weirdo Kingdom, and in order to do that, you have to square yourself. First, let's check it out. What's 3 squared? 3 squared is 3 times itself, which means it's 9. Which means that when 3 goes into Bizarro Kingdom, it becomes 9. What does it do to get back? It's not divide by 3. It's not subtract by 6. Those aren't the opposites. It might get you to 3, but it's not the opposite of what you did to get here. The opposite of what you did to get here, what a square root is basically asking is, what row or what column are you in right now? The square root of 9 is whatever row you're in. The square root of 4 is whatever row you're in. The square root of 16 is whatever row you're in. The columns are the same because they're the same numbers. It's 2 times 2 and 3 times 3 and 4 times 4. So if we were to come back to the kingdom, we would have to square root to return. The question is, 9, what row are you in? What multiplied by itself is 9? What squared is 9? 3 squared is 9. That's what it started out as before it went into Bizarro Kingdom. Roots are pretty complicated in terms of what the operation you're dealing. When you're dealing with roots, you're not dealing with a pile of stuff. What you're really dealing with is a square. If this is a square, and I said that its area is 9, do you think I can draw on this? Do you work with me? If its area is 9... It's like the kid from The Grudge wrote that. If its area is 9, a square root is asking me, what's the length of the side? The length, what times itself gives you an area of 9? The answer is 3 here. That's why the square root of 9 is 3.